Hi, I'm Chrissarandon, and welcome to Cooking by Heart, where my guest and I revisit the vivid memories of the food we grew up with.
I couldn't believe the tastes and the flavors.
Lydia Bastianich. Hi, Chris. Susan Sarandon.
And the people in the stories attached to that time in our lives.
You know, I've been dying to chop this up with you for a while now.
Yeah.
And I would do Julia Child. This is a lovely chocolate macadamia nut truffle that has dark chocolate. You can get it in milk chocolate too. I prefer the dark.
Ladies and gentlemen, Alice Waters.
I was the one sort of like mommy dearest.
He'd order one side of the menu and eat that. And then when he was finished eating that, he'd order the other side of the menu and eat all of that. He emptied the kitchen.
Food is the thing. Come on. We know that. Campaign.
My guest today is award-winning actress Camryn Manheim. Camryn received an Emmy and Golden Globe Award for her portrayal of the feisty defense attorney Eleanor Frutt on the hit television show The Practice, and was also awarded the Women in Film Lucy Award for Innovation in Television, and has received an Off-Broadway Obie Award as well. In her career that spans over 40 years, she's appeared in over 60 television shows, 40 movies, and countless plays. For the last 3 seasons, you could spot Camryn on the streets of New York, playing Lieutenant Kate Dixon on Law and Order. Other notable credits include Stumptown, Utopia, Waco, 2.5 Men, Will and Grace, How I Met Your Mother, The L Word, Ally McBeal, Criminal Minds, Elvis, The Laramie Project, so many more. Camryn made her Broadway debut in Deaf West's Tony-nominated production of Spring Awakening. And she fulfilled a lifelong dream and became a New York Times bestselling author with her book, Wake Up, I'm Fat. And when she's not filming, she teaches and lectures all over the United States and abroad. The extraordinarily accomplished Camryn Manheim, welcome to Cooking by Heart.
Thank you so much, Chris. I can't even believe my own, credits. I think, did I really do that? I'm too young. I'm much too young.
That's right. I know the feeling. By the way, I get this from a lot of people whom I introduce. We don't dwell on things in this business, do we?
No, we just move along to the next. We're really gig players. We go from one gig to the next.
Exactly. Hired hands.
I just want to introduce you to Jeff.
Hey.
He will not let us have this interview alone, so he'll be in and around the interview for the whole day.
Okay, welcome, dude. Anytime. To begin with, usually I start with provenance, where we're from, because that has so much to do with the food we grew up with and also our childhood. New Jersey? Where?
Yeah, I was born in New Jersey, but I don't recall it. I was very young when I left, and then walked around the Midwest. I was in Peoria, Illinois, Marquette, Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan. So we were in the Midwest a lot. My father was a mathematics professor, and he was just going from one university to another. But I landed in Southern California in about 5th grade, stayed there, was there until I went on to college.
So the formative years of your childhood were pretty much in Southern California.
Yes, I would say I consider Long Beach, California my hometown because it's where I became a person with memories,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the memories a little bit. Mom was a teacher?
She was a teacher, yep.
What did she teach?
She taught elementary, middle school, sometimes worked in specialized classrooms with people with different kinds of needs.
Right.
Yeah. She went on to have a radio show called, Aging with Flair. She got very into gerontology and the study of aging.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So she's done a lot in her career. Yeah.
Oh. Sounds like a very interesting woman.
Yeah.
Tell me about the cooking at home. Was mom the primary cook? Was father?
He was.
Yeah?
And she led me to believe that she was a gourmet chef. That just wasn't true.
I was just kind of ready to say, when you said led you to believe, obviously there was a difference in opinions there. How so?
Well, I think she was the first spinner of truths in our family. I think maybe my acting takes after her. This is a gourmet recipe I learned from so-and-so. And it was basically, tuna and pasta with some mushroom soup.
Right.
And it was the tuna casserole with me. Yeah, it was ridiculous. I grew up thinking that was like the best kind of food you could have.
Right.
It wasn't until later I realized that I think we were less about quality and more about quantity in my family.
Right. Now, siblings, did you have siblings?
I do. I have a 5-year-old sister, 5-year-old. She's 5 years older than me.
Yep.
And my brother is 14 years older. So by the time I have any memories, he's gone.
Right.
You know, it turns out we ended up being really close friends later in life, but he was off to the Merchant Marines when I was young.
Right. It's interesting somehow when that gap occurs early on. I know, by the way, greetings from Joanna, my wife.
Oh, that's nice.
She's 14 years older than her sister, Sharon, whom you know well.
Yeah.
And that gap disappeared as they got older as well. Yeah, it's interesting how that happened.
This is a story maybe for another time, but when my brother was at Harvard Law School and I was just a kid, my father, and we'll talk, I guess, about him. He was a professor of mathematics, as I said, and he loved taking people to small claims court, and he would get the Long Beach Press Telegram and circle all the misspelled words and grammatical errors every day and send it back to them for corrections. And when I was, 15, I took him to small claims court. And my brother, who then became my hero, helped me do it.
What was the basis of this claim?
So when I was in 6th grade, I borrowed a camera from him, and I came back from 6th grade camp. I produced the film, and I gave him back the camera. And maybe 2 years later, he said, "You never gave me that camera." I go, "No, I did. I had the photos, reproduced and everything." And he goes, "Just because you had the photos made doesn't mean you ever gave them back to me." And I'm like, "I gave you back that camera." And he said, "You didn't, and I need you to pay for it." And it was like a learning lesson, right? I need you to be responsible.
Right. Yeah.
I worked all after school for a year, and life went on. And years later, after I paid him back, there was a celebration around the dinner table when I paid him back. "We're so proud of you. You made you're an honorable person." And I felt good about it. Like, oh shit, I lost his camera. I paid it back. But years later, I'm in a play in high school. I'm looking for an old man's coat. I go back into his closet, and there in the back, in the corner, in the shag rug, is that Canon camera that I borrowed and he claimed I lost and never returned. I called my brother in law school, and I'm like, "What do I do?" And he goes, "Oh, you're going to ask for interest on the money you earned. You want the new camera that you bought, and you want pain and suffering." And I'm like, "Yes, that's what I want." And he goes, "You're going to ask for it in a letter. He's going to deny it, and then you're going to take him to court." And I did. And by the way, my father could not have been more proud that I took him to small claims court to get my money back that belonged to me. So I took him. It was Manheim versus Manheim. The judge was very confused. My father was hilarious, pretending he was finding letters from his lawyer in Mexico. It was like the most hilarious thing.
Right.
And I won.
Obfuscation, yes. But despite that,
I won the judgment. He had 60 days to pay me back. On the 59th day at midnight, a little check under the door. And it was like, "Congratulations, I'm proud of you."
What a great story. How much did he pay you?
I think the camera was worth like $145. That was a lot back in the day.
Oh, and
I worked an entire school year to pay it back.
Yeah.
So I feel like the judgment was about like a little over $400 for pain, suffering, and interest on that money.
So there were some punitive damages as well.
Yeah, of course.
I love it. That's a great story. Great story. And also, thematically, it's not just a stray too far from what we're doing here, because it's really about childhood memory anyway. So, Mom is an ersatz gourmet cook.
Yeah.
She was a working mom. And by the way, a lot of my guests grew up with working moms, and it was a difficult deal for women, especially in those days.
Yeah.
To come up with food and go to work every day and do the meal planning. And of course, was your dad not involved at all in it?
Not really. He had maybe a few specialties, like he would do some smoked salmon and cut the salmon up.
He would smoke it himself?
Yeah, he would. He was very into that.
Yeah.
He had a few things that he did, but mostly my mom prepared something very quick. But in my mind, it was always gourmet. It wasn't until later did I realize, like, oh no, that's not gourmet.
Right.
It has really harmed me in my life. We'll get to it. It has harmed me in my own preparation of food for people.
I want to understand
have to practice meal prep if I have fancy people coming over, because I'm so afraid I'm going to screw it up.
So for Mom, food was as much performative as it was preparation of the actual dish.
Yes. She was like a magician. You tell people what they're seeing. You know, that's what magicians do. Like, I didn't touch this deck, right? You didn't see me touch this deck. They touched it 5 times, but they're telling you what you saw. She was telling us what we were eating, and we believed.
How interesting.
Also, a little side note.
Yeah.
My mother is very tall. She's 5 foot, maybe between 5'10" and 5'11".
Mm-hmm.
And she had heard early in her life that the reason why pygmies were so short is because they had a lack of salt in their diet. And so my mother refused to have salt in anything. So we never grew up with salt on the table, salt in anything. And I remember being maybe in high school, and I went to someone's home and they put salt on their corn. I'm like, oh my God, that's salt. Like, and they're like, yes, we know. And I go, are you sure you bring that on your corn? I had such an aversion to salt, and I still don't even remember to use it half the time.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? She wanted us to be shorter. My brother was already, 6'3". And we were all tall. And she was like, if I don't put salt in the food,
then they're going to shrink.
They won't grow so tall. Because she didn't like being tall. It was hard to be 5'10".
I'm trying to think about what the logic was that salt somehow expanded your mass in some ways.
That's what she heard. And by the way, my mother is 99, so whatever she did worked. So the food might not have been gourmet, but we've got really good genes.
Wow. Mom's still around.
Still around and still cooking.
Bless her. So at the table, what was the conversation like? Do you recall conversations when you were growing up?
Oh, yeah. Our conversations were always very academic and intellectual. I got quizzed a lot. How many senators to a state? If you see a U-Haul that's 8 by 10, what's the square footage? Like, it was a quiz at all times.
Wow.
I guess my dad enjoyed making my brain think like that. I mean, he taught me about checkbooks and taught me about real estate and taught me, it was at the time seemed cumbersome, but now very appreciative.
Right.
We'd go to museums. We talked about art and music.
Mm-hmm.
It was good. It felt very engaged. And we were allowed to talk at our table. We were allowed to have differences of opinions and argue.
Which was not common at that time.
Not common at all. He was very philosophical, loved esoteric conversations. And it was a bit annoying at the time, but when we sit around the table now and I look at my family and the conversations we have, I am filled with just an enormous amount of gratitude that we're all like-minded thinkers and we have beautiful conversations.
Yeah. Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Sounds like it was a very stimulating time when you guys ate.
It was.
Which also helps digestion, by the way.
Good to know.
Yes, okay. Did you guys eat out?
Never. We never ate out.
Really?
No. I don't know if you know. Do you know the comedian Sebastian Maniscalco?
No.
He has one of the... I ask you and all of your listeners to just YouTube Sebastian Passover. It's one of the funniest things you'll ever hear. He's an Italian going to Passover.
Yep.
Trying to understand gefilte fish and matzah. It's hilarious. But at the end of it, he says, this is what I've learned. The Jews, they fall apart after breakfast. So we did the bagels and lox, and those were really good.
Yeah.
For treats. But honestly, I can't say that food was like super stimulating and exciting in my life.
Yes.
Interesting, right?
Yeah, exactly. My wife Joanna grew up in Southern California around the same time you did, a little earlier probably. But it was very much the same thing with her family. Breakfasts, especially weekend breakfasts, were a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
If people were out of the house, no longer living there, then they came over and had breakfast with mom and dad, with Monty and Marilyn and, the brothers and the sisters and the children. And it was always a major spread. But after that,
Yeah, it was a roasted chicken and some potatoes.
Yeah.
I will say one thing my mom did very well, and this is the thing I did glean from her. She had people over all the time. She had parties all the time. She was a great entertainer, and she was able to, put out a spread for 40 people, pretty easily and organically. It wasn't any fine dining or fine finger foods.
Yeah.
But she would make a sweet and sour meatball, and she would do some fun little finger foods and cheese platters. And I did learn that from her. And that is what I am good at now. A party for 60 people, as opposed to a sit-down dinner for 8. That gives me agita.
Interesting.
Because I feel like people focus on the food. At a party for 60, no one's focused on the food.
They're too
focused
busy
on the people.
Yeah,
and
right.
That works for me. Between Costco and Trader Joe's, I could throw a party for 200 people and you'd think it was catered.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
I have my own chafing dishes. It looks like somebody came in and catered it.
Wow.
Actually, here's a fun story. For my 50th birthday party, my friends did a roast for me.
Yeah.
And as I always have these sweet and sour meatballs that my mom taught me about.
Mm-hmm. I've
never given anyone the recipe. And for my thank you to everyone, I did a PowerPoint presentation on how to make the meatballs.
It's a great idea.
That was my gift back. It was something they could never get without me, and I gave it to everyone.
This is a perfect moment because I would have asked you at the end of the podcast, but I always get a recipe from each of my guests.
Okay.
So think about it.
All right.
If you're willing to disseminate that recipe on a broader level,
okay,
think about it. I'd love to get it. If not, we'll figure something out.
I'm happy. It can be made in 10 minutes. Your listeners are going to be so thrilled.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Other things that occurred to me when I talk about growing up, because they were important to me, was, for instance, when I came home from school, I needed a snack because I was always hungry. What did you do when you came home from school?
I'm pretty much a sugar addict. So I went straight for anything sugar.
Oh, really?
And if there wasn't enough in the house, I usually went to a corner store and got something. I was just ravenous for sugar.
Really?
Something sweet and chocolatey. So that's what I was always looking for.
So that was your go-to snack?
I'd come home and that's what it's like the cigarette at the end of school. You can't, you're not done until you have it. It's like.
Well, I kind of feel that way about dessert in general. After a meal, for instance, there's always, I want that little,
sweet.
That's the little thing. Yeah.
It's
exactly.
an end to it. So but I also, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm embarrassed to say it, but I was a big fan of just mayonnaise sandwiches.
Oh.
Isn't that horrible? If we didn't have turkey meat, I would just make a mayonnaise sandwich on white bread.
This does not send chills up and down my spine at all, because I love mayonnaise in general. I'm a big mayonnaise freak.
I am too. To be honest with you, Chris, I only eat food as a vehicle for condiments. If I could just eat condiments and survive, I would be so happy. The sauce.
What would you put in that category?
Well, mayonnaise is number one.
Yeah.
All kinds of different mustards and ketchup and sauce. Like I make, I do things with rice wine vinegar and garlic and, and Italian seasonings and stuff that I just love. I love salad dressings and sauces and anything.
Ooh, yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, I'm coming over to your house. Next time I'm in Los Angeles, you're going to sauce me, okay?
I'll sauce you up. All
right. What about school food? Were lunches made for you when you went to school?
No, I got $2.50 or whatever it was to get a hot food. The sloppy joes were my favorite. The burgers, the pizza. To me, that just was really good food. So you can see how the food at my house is no better. I'm like, this is gourmet food.
Oh, yes, exactly.
It's so funny because Jewish mothers consider themselves really good cooks. But honestly, I am not that into brisket. I'm not into all of that because it just wasn't. Every now and then I'll go to someone's house whose Jewish mother makes a beautiful Jewish brisket. And I'm like, well, this is what it was supposed to be.
This is what it was supposed to be like.
My mother would be so upset if I'm not going to tell her about this podcast.
Okay.
I ate the school hot lunches and was very happy. Very, very happy. I could have gone to prison and been happy, to be honest with you. And believe me, that was a possibility a couple of times in my life.
Oh, really? You were just teetering, were you?
I got myself into some trouble. Yeah, I've seen the inside of a county jail a couple of times.
Really?
Yes, I have.
Wow. Pranks?
Well,
would you rather not get specific about this, this
one
dark side of your life?
One was where I had my feet hanging out a car window, and a police officer pulled us over. And he told me to pull my feet in, and then when we left, I flipped him off. Yeah, I don't know what was wrong with me. I'm not that same wild child. I mean, I have a little of it, but
anti-authoritarian.
I got sent to jail, and my parents came down. I mean, through the judge. I was only there for 4 or 5 hours, and then the judge ordered a fine. And my parents argued that they would be paying the fine and it would be nothing to me.
Right.
And that really I should go and sweep the county jail for 4 weekends. And he agreed. So that was my fine for flipping off an officer. I don't recommend it. Don't do this.
No.
And then the next time I was thrown in jail, I was participating in a pro-choice rally in college. I got thrown in jail and I called my mom and dad. And I said, Mom, Dad, I'm in jail. And they're like, oh my God, honey, what for? And I said, I was participating in a pro-choice rally and they arrested a couple of us. And my mom went, oh my God, honey, mazel tov. Congratulations. And I go, no, Mom, I need you to get me out. She goes, no, you stay in there and make your point. And then she hung up. That was my second time. I'm like, shit, my mom's not even going to get me out of jail this time.
What? That's extraordinary. No, your parents sound really interesting.
They were very interesting. Yeah. I mean, and annoying. And
yes. Oh, well, all of our parents are annoying up to a certain time, and then they become wise, right?
But I have a lot of respect for both of them, and I feel like I had a good upbringing, a good education.
Yeah.
My father was very much into spicy food. He's gone now, and every time I eat kimchi or something a little exotic that's spicy, it brings back memories of him. It floods me with memories.
Yeah.
When I eat things my father loved that not everyone liked, He liked the crazy stuff, the brains and the cow tongue and things nobody wanted.
Yep. Yeah. That was very much the experience in my family. And I think that came from, I don't know what his lineage was in terms of where his people came from originally.
Right.
My parents were both Greek. And tongue was a staple. In the restaurant my dad owned, brains, but that was a West Virginia thing too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, brains and eggs for breakfast, which was a big deal.
Interesting.
Chicken livers, a lot.
What do they call brains? Like sweetbread or something?
No, sweetbread is a gland, I think.
Oh.
It's gland. For those of you who are not watching, Camryn just did the I can't, and put her fingers in her ears.
I know.
So I want to move on to, so now you're at an age where you're leaving. Did you go away to college, or did you just stay home and go to college?
No, I went away to college. I went to UC Santa Cruz because, I wanted to be a hippie, play the guitar, and learn every Neil Young song he ever wrote, and that was the place to go.
Yeah.
And I was there for 4 years. And then I went to New York, where food really opened up for me in New York.
Well, I was going to lead into that. But while you were in college, were there any awakenings that occurred? Culinary awakenings? Were you in a dorm?
I was not in a dorm. I always lived by myself. And it was just, regular, just eating to stay alive.
Right.
It wasn't part of my life to have beautiful meals, and I couldn't afford to really go out. So, I did just food to stay alive, some fast food.
Yeah. We will move on to New York because that was sort of the next spot I was going to get to. And that was, how did that change things? You were then in graduate school, right?
Right. I moved from Santa Cruz to New York City, and I'm in grad school. And all of a sudden I'm meeting people who like to cook, who want you to come over and make food. And it was such a beautiful experience, but it gave me anxiety because I wanted to have people over, but they weren't going to get people were making beautiful Italian meals and, and really healthy meals. And I was kind of dumbfounded by it. I didn't have any experience. So I enjoyed it. I was mesmerized by it, but it was always stressful to me to try to do that myself. Mm-hmm. So I did what I told you earlier. I started having a lot of people over at once. So that the food wasn't the focus, right? But the people were. Yeah. And thank God for Costco and Trader Joe's, because I could put together, I'm on Trader Joe's links where people just make food just from Trader Joe's. I've had Trader Joe's parties where you can only bring things with the ingredients from Trader Joe's so that we can all be introduced.
I had no idea.
It's fantastic. That's when I became a major hostess. Mm-hmm. And I had a great apartment in New York. It was a big apartment. Mm-hmm. And I have photos, Chris, from back in the day where, like Jude Law would be there and John Kennedy Jr. would be there. And just, I had the most amazing people would come because I had a big loft apartment, and I would feed everyone. And I just have the best, incredible, I have photographs from that time, and it looked like the Andy Warhol time of my time, just.
How did you connect with these people? Just a network?
Well, I was in grad school as an actor. I was a bartender on Broadway. Aaron Sorkin was my boss at one point. All of these young, amazing, phenomenal actors and directors and writers were working in the Broadway scene. So I started to get to know those actors, and Jude Law was on Broadway and I was a bartender in his, so we would just all get to know him like, I'm having a party, come on over. And he was new to New York and he came and, that's just how it goes. And then, Marcia Gay Harden was in my school, and we had the greatest people, and we all loved to be together on the weekends. So I would love to put together these parties.
So you were kind of the
80 people.
You were kind of the Pearl Mesta of your day. Those of you
I also want to be like the Gertrude Stein of the East Coast.
So more a salon than it sounds very exciting. So and you did all the food preparation?
I did all the food preparation because I'm good at mass amounts of food. Like I said, not quality, but quantity.
Can you describe some of the things you prepared then?
I would make the meatballs and put them in a huge shaping dish. I would make little pizzas. I have a pizza oven. Let me tell you something. I once wanted to have a cheese platter, and I went to Gelson's or something and asked them to make it. And it was so expensive. I went, screw that. You would die if you saw my cheese platters. They are they could be award winning. I make 6 foot long cheese platters.
Whoa.
And they're gorgeous. I'll send you a picture. Maybe.
Oh, dude. We'll post it. Absolutely.
I would do that and have, I would have stuffed grape leaves and just things that were hearty that you could eat, and people would just be super happy,
Yes, right. Drinks as well, I'm assuming. Drinks. There was a bar.
I've never been a drinker because I rode a motorcycle most of my life, and my brother only agreed to teach me how to ride a motorcycle if I promised I would never drink while I owned a motorcycle.
Oh, that's interesting.
I owned a motorcycle till I was 40. And so I never drank, and I never learned to drink or like it. So by the time I was 40 and was trying things, I will get wasted in this is the only nickname that really serves me my entire life. They call me Teaspoon because that's all I need. And I will get naked and dance on a table. You know what I mean? So I built up an allergy or something to it because I don't need much, and I get so
Right. Interesting that you were, as you described it, not addicted, but that you would go for sugar on the one hand, but on the other hand, alcohol, which turns to sugar in the body.
I have 0 alcohol. I never drank. And I still don't. People think I do because I behave as if I'm completely wasted at parties. I don't really drink. I don't not drink because I have an issue with it.
Right.
I never drink. And it's really interesting when I say to somebody, and I go, I don't drink, it's fine, I don't need any. And they're like, oh. And I go, no, I was never an alcoholic. I just never drank, you know?
Right. I'm not in a 12-step.
You really have to, people just think automatically you're sober.
Right.
yes, I would have beer and wine. I didn't have major hard liquor there because I didn't really know about it and I couldn't afford it. So
Well, these parties sound great.
They were great. They were in the heyday. You know, if you ask any actor back about their life back in the day, they will name a bunch of actors that are really well known who were unknown then. And they were just, you know, Billy Crudup was at my parties and, you know, people were just, everybody was there. We were all the NYU, Yale, Juilliard kids in New York.
Right.
And so all of those actors have gone on to done really beautifully. But at the time we were just really struggling, and they'd come to my house for a party because I had space and meatballs.
Yes.
Basically.
So speaking of actors who've moved on, you did as well. I'm curious about, because I don't know much about it, how it happened. And it happened, obviously, with this show that you did, this one-woman show, correct?
Yeah. When I got out of NYU, I was one of two people in my class who didn't get an agent. And it was, you know, very debilitating. It was very sad. You can imagine what that feels like. You start to think like, oh, I'm terrible. Nobody, but it wasn't, I guess I knew deep down, it wasn't because I wasn't a good actor. It was because I was, you know, a big, curvy girl and no one knew what to do with me.
Yeah.
I would go and meet agents and they'd say, you remind me of a young Kathy Bates. And by the way, Kathy Bates is one of my idols, but I would say to them, what about Kathy Bates? Do I remind you? She's a foot shorter. She's Southern.
Yes.
She's 15 years older than me. Like, how do I remind? And really what it is that we were big women. We were, you know, big, curvy girls. And that's what they saw me as. And I wrote a book, and I'll tell you about that, but I have a whole chapter of just reviews of my theater work. And every single reviewer, everyone pointed out my weight. The curvy Camryn Manheim, the softed Camryn Manheim, the big and bold Camryn Manheim, the big and bold, beautiful Camryn. They couldn't, it's as if you were reading a review and they just said, and Camryn Manheim was excellent. Yes. You'd be like, which one was that? Oh, she was the fat girl. Oh, why did you say so? Like, you know, it was, they had to define me only by my weight. So that was I get out of NYU. I'm now 7 years of acting training. I can't get an agent. And I'm basically doing free theater downtown, just trying to get experience. And my backup job I was a sign language interpreter. So I was running around on my motorcycle in New York. I was in a hospital. I would be at a math class at NYU. I'd be at a psychiatric evaluation here. Right. And I would be interpreting for deaf people.
How did you learn to sign?
Well, I learned to sign because, you know, as I told you earlier, both my parents were very academic. Their only son went to Harvard. You know, you have to be smart in my family. Yeah. I failed French and Spanish twice in high school, and I could not get into college. So you can imagine I'm not going to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, right? It was such an ordeal that I couldn't get into college. So I had to go to a community college for a semester to pick up a language. And I went to the college and I'm like, what am I going to take? Maybe I just take something like Chinese that's visual, you know? And there I saw on the board sign language offered for one semester only as a language. It was before only offered as a what do you call it? When you pick like an art.
An elective. Yeah.
Elective. It wasn't a language, but this time it was. So I mischievously took beginning and intermediate in one semester. And I passed both of them because it was easy. And I learned 10 signs. You know, I learned, are you deaf? Can you sign that slower? That's basically all I learned. And then I went on to my college and got myself a bachelor's degree. So now I can be buried in a Jewish cemetery. The week that I was leaving Santa Cruz to start my new life in New York, I was walking down the road and I saw a man get hit by a car. And it was pretty bad. Oh, wow. And I was knocking on every door, call the ambulance, call the police. And they did. And they all came. And they all surrounded this man who was lying on the concrete. And I was across the street just hoping that he was going to be okay. And they kept asking him, sir, tell us your name. We'd like to call your family, sir. And you know, when anyone's in shock, you speak louder and louder. I've seen this before in TV shows. And they're like, sir, we've asked you 3 times and you haven't told us your phone number. We need your phone number. And I don't know what hit me. I walked over to one of the police officers and I said, could he be deaf? And he said, can you ask him if he's deaf? And I said, I can maybe ask him if he's deaf, but like, that's it.
Right.
And I leaned over to this man and I said, "Sir, are you deaf?" And with his broken clavicle, he signed yes. And I went, "He's deaf, he's deaf." And we're all flipping out, like, "Oh my God, he's deaf." And he goes, "Get his phone number." And I go, I can't get his number. Numbers are really hard in sign language. They're not what you think they are.
Yeah.
They're very complicated. Imagine counting to 1 billion on one hand. It's not easy.
Right.
So and he's upside down with a broken arm. It's not easy. And I go, "I can't." And they go, "You have to get his number." And they're like yelling at me. And I'm like, "I need your number." And that's when the 5 signs I knew came in handy, because I signed probably a dozen times. "I'm sorry. Can you sign that slower?"
Yes.
It was terrible. I felt awful.
Yeah.
He gave me his number and I said, "I think this is his number." And they said, "We'd like you to come to the hospital." And I said, I'm telling you, I do not know sign language. That's it. Those are the 5 signs I know.
Right.
And the cop said to me, "Well, you know more than we do."
Mm.
And I got in the back of that police car. And I remember thinking to myself, "Oh my God, I've never been asked so nicely to get in the back of a police car before."
Right, given your checkered history, right?
And I went to the hospital and his family came. Everyone was deaf. And I was tasked with telling his family about his problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the doctor coming out and going, "Just tell him that he's going to be fine. He has a small tear in the lower right ventricle of his heart." I'm like, no, I can't tell him that. And I was drawing on a piece of paper a big heart, and I was cutting it into 4 sections. Right. And I only knew about quadrants because of my mathematics father, and I'm pretending to sew up a little area. But the one thing I could do was, with my expressions, sign, "He's going to be okay."
Yeah.
With thumbs up and with the fine, hands.
Yeah.
And I felt like I made them feel a little safer that he was going to be okay. And I walked out of the hospital that day. And, I called that hospital 5 times and no one would ever tell me if he was okay. Because I wasn't a real interpreter and I wasn't a part of the family. And I moved to New York a week later. And it really stuck in my heart. Like, this doesn't feel right. And 3 doors down from NYU was the New York Society of the Deaf. And I saw a sign and I walked in and said, "I have Mondays off. What do you teach?" They said, "We teach beginning sign language." And I took it for all 3 years. And when I graduated from NYU, I was fluent in sign language. And shortly after, I took classes to become an interpreter. And while I was struggling to be an actor, when every agent thought I looked like Kathy Bates and they had nothing for me, I was interpreting for money. And that's what got me through. And then finally, I don't know, 5 or 6 years after just doing free theater and interpreting, I decided to write a one-woman show. And the people who I had spoken to who had written shows before said, "Don't just write a show to write a show. Write a show that you're an expert on, that you know more about anything, that don't, and I thought, you know more about anything? Growing up fat in America and everyone hating you because you're fat or dismissing you, doctors dismissing you, men dismissing you." So I wrote a one-woman show called Wake Up, I'm Fat. And it was just about all of those things, like wanting to be an actor and being heavy. Like, how is that going to work?
Yes.
Who's going to ever cast me, in my own age range,
Yes.
And so I wrote the show. It wasn't poor me, sad me. It was more like, all right, bring it on.
Yeah.
Bring it on, people. And
no victimization at all.
It wasn't victimized.
Yeah.
And in the show, I had conversations with my fat, like telling my fat how much I hated it. And then my fat telling me how much I really loved it and how comforting and what a friend it was to me. So I would have these conversations back and forth. And I told all these great stories about growing up and how my parents really, harmed my psyche there, my sibling, my sister, my friends, boys, and then getting into NYU and them wanting me to be smaller. I had a teacher who said to me, "Your body is your instrument. And you show a lack of commitment to your art by not taking care of your instrument." And I mean, it was so awful to say that to somebody.
Screwed up advice.
I was terrible. And so it's about me, like, learning how to accept myself, love myself as I was, and fighting all of these, negative, every bus stop I looked at, every magazine, every billboard was telling me I wasn't good enough.
Yes.
So I wrote, it's kind of political. It's interesting. And I wrote a one-woman show called Wake Up I'm Fat. I did it in small venues, and finally it ended up at the Public Theater, which you and I know is just a premier theater to have your one-woman show at. Yeah. And it really changed my life. And a casting director saw it, asked me why. He goes, why don't I know who you are? And I go, I think that's your problem, not mine. Right. Like, you should know who I am. That's your job.
Exactly.
And he asked me if I had any tape, and I had one tape. I did not have an agent. I didn't have anyone, but because New York Undercover and Law and Order, which is quite a circular moment.
Yeah.
They needed lawyers who knew sign language. They went to the sign language school and said, do you have anybody who's an actor? Because we need people who know how to sign. And they go, oh, we got this girl who just graduated from NYU. So I got 2 jobs on Dick Wolf shows playing a lawyer who knew how to sign in their shows. So I gave him that tape. He brought it back and showed it to the creator of the practice. He's like, she's not right. She's not what I want. I need a streetwise and sassy girl. And the casting director was like, I just saw her one-woman show. She's streetwise and sassy. And he goes, yeah, but look at her in these clips. She's all buttoned up with pearls on. He's like, David, the wardrobe people put her in that.
Exactly.
That's a character. I'm telling you, I just saw her one-woman show.
Absolutely. So, this is called acting.
It's ridiculous. So David agreed to meet me, but he wasn't into me.
By the way, folks, we're talking about David Kelley. David
E. Kelley. Who wrote Practice, Ally McBeal.
Yeah, plus he's now very active, in streaming as well.
Amazing writer.
Yeah.
So I went to meet him. It was a terrible meeting. It was maybe 4 or 5 minutes. He was not into me, and I could tell. And I was getting up to leave, and I noticed that he had a cribbage board on the side of his couch. And we talked about this in this interview, but I'm an avid games player, whether it's cribbage or poker or backgammon or anything.
Right,
I'm a big game player. And so I just said to him, do you play cribbage? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, he's married to Michelle Pfeiffer. Like, when in the hell does he play cribbage? I would never play cribbage if I was married to Michelle Pfeiffer. And so I go, do you play cribbage? And he looked at me, and for the first time in the entire interview, he showed some signs of life.
Yes. He really looked at you.
He looked at me and he went, yeah, I do play cribbage, but I don't think you want to go there with me. And I looked back at him and I said, oh my gosh, David, I feel like we could have this conversation and I could try to impress you, like I'm obviously doing unsuccessfully now.
Yeah.
And I could beat the shit out of you at cribbage at the same time. And he went, oh no, I don't think you understand. I play the computer. And I said, I don't think you understand. I play for money. Why don't we fuck this audition? I'll play you right now for the part. It was insane.
What?
And he sat up in his chair and he's like, yeah, I don't think you understand. He's so engaged with me now because he's a competitor. I don't think you understand. I skunked my mother last week. And I go, you know what I do understand? I smell your fear. The casting director and Jeffrey Kramer, who are sitting in the meeting, they look like, what the hell is going on right now? And I go, come on, David. Let's play for the part. And he goes, I don't have time to play you for a part. And I go, I don't know how long it takes you to lose, but I could do it in about 7 minutes. And he was so befuddled by the whole thing.
Right.
He goes, I can't make that promise to you. And I go, why not? And he goes, because if I were to lose, and it's a big if, I haven't written the script yet, so I wouldn't be able to give you the script if you won. And he goes, but I'll make you this deal. If you get out of my office right this minute, you'll be the first person to get the script when it's done.
Oh.
And you've got a deal. And I walked out and the casting director followed me and he's like, what just happened? I go, your boss thinks he can beat me in cribbage and he's wrong. So life went on. A couple weeks later, I get a script. It was exactly the kind of person I could play. It was perfect. I went through another couple audition processes because you have to go through the producers and then the
network. Yes.
When I finally got the part, I sent him a small cribbage board with a note, and it just said, I challenge you to a duel, you big fat wuss. And that was the beginning of my relationship with David Kelley.
That's a wonderful story, by the way.
It's true.
And also such an object lesson in taking possession of a situation that seems to be out of hand, but doesn't necessarily have to be, as long as you are your authentic self.
That's exactly right. And that's what I try to teach my students too, is, I knew I had lost that battle. That battle was over. I wasn't getting that part.
Yeah, yeah.
So I left, but to just be the person that people like me for, and I just unleashed my real self, and he saw it.
Yep.
He saw the streetwise and sassy girl, which he was looking for.
Ah, what a great story. Now, this leads me into, because one of the things I say at toward the end of your introduction was that you lecture and you teach all the time. What do you lecture about? What do you teach?
I'm on a lecturing circuit. So sometimes I'm at the Jewish Federation, or sometimes I'm at the YWCA talking about, girls and their body image. And all they could be. But I teach a lot to actors who are soon to graduate. And I teach a class about what your life is like after school. If I named the class, they usually call it like a career class. And I think they think coming to learn about agents and managers, and that is not at all what I teach.
Right.
Really teach about being prepared for this time and the in-between of working. I want to know, if you take acting out of your life, who are you? Because that is what you have most of the time. If acting is the only thing that makes you happy, you're going to be not happy a lot of the time.
Right.
So I'm trying to build up an anchor of who you are, where you find joy and happiness. So when I teach the class, we get ready to graduate. I make them learn about service. I'm asking, if you were going to volunteer, what would that be like? Would it be, I go, most actors just want to matter. We want to make a difference and matter.
Right.
When you're in this awful career where you're just being turned down and not included, you don't feel very worthwhile.
Yeah.
So how can you make yourself feel worthwhile? Well, go and give service. Teach somebody to read. Be a big brother, a sister. Feed people.
Be of service to something or someone.
You will feel, and when you go into auditions, feeling like you matter comes with you. And I know you think going to teach a kid to read isn't going to make your auditions better, but it will. Because I've been a reader when I was studying to be an actor. I was a reader. I was the person you came in, a prominent actor would come in and read with me.
Right.
And I could tell right off the bat who had confidence, who was the Ivy League, they were going to be able to feel like could do this.
Yeah.
And people who had lives that mattered. And I really try to instill that to my students, that you have a small time to mourn when you get out of school and feel shitty. And then I want to know what you're doing a week from Monday. What are you doing to make the world a better place? Because that's going to make everything you do better. And we just talk about that. We talk about finances. We talk about dealing with parents who are nervous who want to be an actor. We talk about health and just soulfulness. And I really just want to give them a head start when they are about to be launched into a very brutal territory.
A very brutal territory in which they are judged constantly and rejected almost always.
Almost always.
Yeah. I tell the story all the time. One of my daughters, when she was 5 or 6 years old, and she was sitting with a friend, having ice cream with the friend's mother, and the mother was asking about what their parents did. And she turned to her own child, this woman. She said, "You know what Daddy does?" And the little girl said, "Yeah, he makes wires in houses." And she turned to my daughter and she said, "You know what your daddy does, don't you?" And she said, "Yeah, he looks for work."
Oh.
Well, it was not a terrible thing to her, because that's who I was when I wasn't off doing something. I was on the phone. I was going in for an audition. But it did not stop me from being a parent.
Right.
It did not stop me from, I was not woe is me when I wasn't working. But the reality is, for most actors, they don't really, people who think they want to be actors, they don't understand that part of it.
There's a small, sexy part about wanting to be an actor, and the rest is super hard work and long hours, and then rejection, and judgment.
Yep.
Everything you do, there's a review about you.
Yeah.
And some people, can say horrible things.
Yeah.
John Simon once wrote something that said, "The following actors I hate," and just did a list of,
Jesus. God.
It's but you can survive that if you have a good anchor, a good base. That's what I think acting schools don't teach enough. So I developed a course about that.
This is brilliant. by the way.
And it's really helpful. And in fact, I was just renting I was renting an apartment in New York, and this person called me and she said, "You were my teacher." And she verbatim spoke about a couple of the things that I talk about how you make it and last the 10 years, when you're getting the 10,000 hours, the 10 years it takes.
Right. Yeah.
For most actors, it's about 10 years before you see a real living out of it.
Yeah, right. If you're lucky.
And it really filled my heart that she said, I think about what you said all the time. I tell young actors what you said all the time. I'm not sure I'd be an actor if I hadn't had your class. And now she's going to stay in my apartment because she's doing a big TV show, So sweet.
And you're paying it forward, which is so great. Well, Camryn, that's wonderful. Well, what better way to conclude our conversation after this wonderful story about what you do for others, to take it back to you and to ask you the question that I ask everybody, which is, if there is one event in your life, or is any event in your life that in which a smell or a taste takes you back to a time when you were a kid, what would that be?
There's a little store in the Lower East Side. I lived in the Lower East Side my entire time that I was in New York, but I never went to it because it was in a bad neighborhood. But now that neighborhood, of course, is the hippest neighborhood in the world, on Rivington Street in the Lower East Side.
Yeah, yeah.
When I walk into that store, my life flashes before me.
There you go.
It's called Economy Candy. It's every candy I coveted and loved in my childhood, from the Fifth Avenue to the Abba Zabbas to the, I swear to God, like, remember we talked about earlier, I was a candy sugar-aholic. It isn't comfort food. It's when I go and see those old candy wrappers, it brings me right back to the Five and Dime store I went to.
Absolutely.
Right back to stealing money from my mother's purse to go get it.
Yeah.
I was bound to end up in jail one way or the other. But honestly, I go into that store and my heart just fills up because I can remember those, those wafers in the playground. And I can remember bartering with that candy, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for some reason, it was those old candies that just did it for me.
That's exactly what this show's about.
So go to Economy Candy when you ever have a chance. It's in every book now as being one of the trendy spots to visit. And all the candies you ever loved will be there on the walls.
Makes me want to go.
So good.
And with that, Camryn Manheim, I want to thank you. I can't thank you enough for your wonderful stories, and also for passing on a kind of wisdom that I think is effortlessly useful to people in whatever they do. You spoke about, when you're not doing what it is you want to do in terms of what you love, what's the rest of your life like?
Yeah.
What's that all about?
You have to be prepared for that, or else it is very, it's so brutal, So we got to help them. We got to help them have a full life, whether they're acting or not.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's so much more to life.
Yeah, whatever vocation they choose. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, thank you, Camryn Manheim, for joining us on Cooking by Heart.
Thank you, Chris. This was wonderful.